facing one of the biggest threats in human history.
Welcome to ASEAN People Speak, Season 4. I'm Regine Jessica Abuel, your host for this podcast. For our fifth episode, we are diving into the environmental justice in ASEAN, focusing on disaster risk reduction and management, or DRRM. We will be joined by our distinguished expert and researcher in natural hazards, disaster risk reductions, and climate change. He is an academician of the National Academy of Science and Technology, or NAST, and a professor at the National Institute of Geological Sciences, University of the Philippines. He is currently the director of the University of the Philippines Nationwide Operational Assessment of Hazards, or UP-NOAA Center, and he is also the executive director of the University of the Philippines Resilience Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Alfredo Mahar Francisco Lagmay from the Philippines. Thank you so much, Dr. Lagmay, for joining us today for our fifth episode of ASEAN People Speak. How are you?
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening, and I understand you are from the Philippines, yes? So,
Yes, that's right. I'm a Filipino, born here
proudly
in Quezon
Filipino.
City, Metro Manila.
Very nice. So it's also good to hear from a fellow kababayan during this podcast. So I guess we'll just start off now with Dr. Lagmay. To start off our conversation on environmental justice, what for you is environmental justice, and why do you think is it crucial for ASEAN given our vulnerability to natural disasters?
Let me start by trying to talk about environmental justice. It's really about people and the environment. Sometimes, in the course of development and trying to achieve progress, we disturb the ecosystem, which in turn has sometimes negative impacts on communities, especially the marginalized and vulnerable. And when we talk about environmental justice, it means the just treatment and meaningful involvement in government decision making, as well as other activities that affect human health and the environment. In environmental justice, we should include everybody, regardless of race, color, income, and even IPs should be included in the equation. Those persons with disabilities should be ensured of fair play in managing the environment. We need to ensure full protection from disproportionate activities that affect our human health and our environment. In defining environmental justice, I'd like to emphasize effects on climate, because when we do activities, especially during the Industrial Revolution, it affected um, the way by which we live. It affected the environment. The earth is getting warmer. There's global warming, and it has changed our climate very rapidly. Um, this is a type of environmental justice that we also need to address, because it actually has impacts, unequal impacts rather, on the marginalized and vulnerable populations, including a lot of populations in developing countries. And in seeking such fairness in handling the burden of the impacts of climate change, we need to do something. For example, our country, the Philippines, is in the typhoon belt. And climate scientists predict that the typhoons and severe weather events will become more harsh. It will worsen, packing stronger winds, more rainfall that will lead to bigger floods and more frequent floods, more widespread landslides that sometimes turn into disasters. And it affects our GDP, and it incurs the Philippines or communities in the Philippines a lot of problems, a lot of losses and damages, and sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of fatalities due to the hazard impacts. And largely, this is because the climate change is because of the increased emissions of greenhouse gases, particularly CO2, that has caused this major problem. It's basically due to the burning of fossil fuels as an offshoot of which started rather during the Industrial Revolution.
Wow, thank you so much for that very comprehensive way to explain environmental justice, Dr. Lagmay. And I'd like to touch upon what you mentioned a while ago, that environmental justice actually encompasses everything. It affects all kinds of people, different kinds of people, from those who are marginalized to the IPs, to those ordinary citizens, and even to those who are in the upper social class. So, but then when you mentioned a while ago that there are certain things that we do to the environment, the effects are unequal. And most of the time, the ones that suffer are those coming from developing countries. You've mentioned a while ago that climate change is because of increased emissions of greenhouse gases. And this particular phenomena affects not just the environment itself, but has a has an effect also in other aspects of a nation or a state. Now, I just want to ask, recently, Dr. Lagmay, can you give us an example other than, for example, the Philippines? Are there any other disasters or recent or relevant incidents where you think our listeners could connect climate justice or climate change in different parts of the ASEAN region?
Yes, actually, we have a lot of examples here in the Philippines. And for when we talk about environmental justice, there are court examples. The Supreme Court is dealing with all of these complaints about people being impacted because of activities or unfair practices of some groups, including government. I would like to give an example about the case of Iligan City and the Center for Alternative Legal Forum and Injustice, which acted as petitioner, where they filed a case against the city government of Iligan, the Mines and Geosciences Bureau, the DNR Secretary, the DILG Secretary, the National Defense Secretary, the PNP Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces.
Everyone getting involved in
Yes,
this case, yes.
yes, the provincial government of Bukidnon, and as well as the Commission on Audit. They were charged of also the lack of disaster preparedness,
Mm.
mining and legal operations, which is handled by the DNR. And the Supreme Court actually is looking into urgent measures to compel the respondents to take serious action and attention on environmental and safety concerns, as well as to prevent human factors that aggravated the damage brought about by Typhoon Sendong. Sendong actually it was a tropical storm rather. It packed
Mm.
less winds but dumped a lot of rain that caused massive flooding all over Iligan and Cagayan de Oro. And the court actually said that there are urgent measures that need to be put in place, like the city
Mm.
government was tasked to provide relocation to residents living in danger areas. The city government was asked to formulate a comprehensive disaster risk reduction and management plan to climate change impacts. And there were other things that they were asked to do, like create an anti-illegal task force to confiscate and remove all logs stocked in log ponds in Iligan City. The MGB and DNR were instructed to not allow mining and quarrying operations, and as well as the citizens trying to access the transactions involving the calamity fund for Sendong.
Mm.
We have a lot of other cases where there's injustice. Like, for example, there were evacuees that were put in a refugee center, an evacuation center, where they all died. So these
Oh,
were put in an evacuation center, and 566 people died in that evacuation center
oh no.
because of, I would like to say, maybe quote unquote, wrong science. And
Yes.
then, for example, during Typhoon Haiyan, we've had a lot of complaints. So I don't know if they were put into court, but it's the same case. There were a lot of people who were put in evacuation centers primarily because we knew little about the impacts of
The
bigger hazards
typhoon.
than what we have
Yes.
experienced. No? And
Yes.
when they were put in those evacuation centers, that is where they died because the
Yeah.
hazard maps, for example, were only up to 20 meters from the coastline, but the storm surges entered 2 kilometers
Oh
inland,
no.
uh, overwhelming the
Yeah.
evacuation centers.
Yes.
So I believe that this is injustice because of quote unquote, again, wrong risk knowledge determination or assessments.
Yes.
There's injustice there because we it caused a lot of deaths. But of
Yes,
course, this
definitely.
is something that is difficult to prove, right? Uh,
Yes.
Hence the problem also of filing cases in such events.
Thank you for that example. And actually, that could be a very good springboard now, Dr. Lagmay, to my next question, because you've mentioned that, casualties happened, lives were taken because of poor approach when it comes to these calamities. And I guess I'd like to ask now, how do you think in the ASEAN region, aside from the Philippines, for example, thank you for giving us that example. How do you think ASEAN is doing in terms of environmental justice for vulnerable communities? And how do you think DRRM, or disaster risk reduction and management, play? How does it contribute to environmental justice, not just in our country, in the Philippines, but in the ASEAN region as well?
Okay, just following up from the previous discussion, what I said about the impacts of climate change and disasters, poor planning, putting people in evacuation centers, development, and in consideration of the interplay between people and the community, wherein we disturb ecosystems, which in turn affect people because of some kind of natural events that get aggravated. The perfect example would be greenhouse gas emissions that has changed our climate. In the ASEAN, we said also that, for example, the Philippines, which is part of ASEAN, is in the typhoon belt, and we carry the burden of being hit by the adverse impacts of climate
Climate
change.
change, yeah.
Now, the good thing about the ASEAN is that recently, actually in this year, civil society and other stakeholders have been discussing the way forward to draft what they call as the ASEAN Declaration on the Right to a Clean, Safe, Healthy, and Sustainable Development. And it's called also the ASEAN People's Draft Declaration on Environmental Rights. I think
Mm.
this is necessary because we need to continue the discussions on environmental justice, including climate justice. And it's good that the Environmental Rights Working Group is leading the policy drafting. It is led by the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, or AICHR,
Mhm.
and comprises representatives of the human rights group, ASEAN sectoral bodies, the UN, and civil society. Civil society is participating, and the draft was put out this year, early during this year. So the discussions on human rights, on environmental justice, as well as climate justice, should always be in the forefront. We cannot put it aside because all of the complaints, all of these issues need to be addressed. We cannot just leave the marginalized and vulnerable people behind.
I agree. I definitely agree. We cannot leave them behind because they too deserve an environment or a place where they will feel safe and at the same time protected from all these environmental harms. Now, Dr. Lagmay, as head of different organizations focusing on disaster risk management, reduction in management. Do you think ASEAN as a region is doing a good job in this part or in this aspect so that environmental justice could be achieved in the region? What do you think?
Yeah, with that draft ASEAN Declaration on the right to a clean, safe, healthy, and sustainable development, as well as the ASEAN People's Draft Declaration on Environmental Rights, I think we are on the right track. We're trying to address issues, those that are within ongoing debate. They are issues that are very important to be discussed and not set aside. And working group members, although they may disagree, we cannot just keep it floating without any actual actual decision on how to address the problem. So this draft is very important. It continues to keep the discussions alive, so that we don't forget and we remember that we need to do something about it.
Yes, I agree. The that draft is a very good start. Not just for each ASEAN member to become a part of the whole program in bringing environmental justice in the region, but also acting upon it and doing or having concrete projects or ways for each state to achieve the goals of um, that particular agreement. So you've mentioned a while ago about the draft ASEAN Declaration on the right to a safe, clean, and healthy and sustainable environment. Now, how do you think, Dr. Lagmay, can ASEAN, its member states, and stakeholders contribute more effectively to environmental justice? So we've talked about the draft declaration already, and this is policy. But other than that, what do you think as somebody who is in the field and at the same time doing the actual planning and implementation of certain measures to reduce and manage disasters? What do you think the ASEAN and its member states and stakeholders can contribute to effectively promote and have implement environmental justice in the region?
Well, everything is in the draft declaration. It tries to look into the existing legal provisions, including those being discussed in the COP conferences, and including the Paris Agreement, recognizing a lot of the provisions in the Sendai framework, including ecosystems management. And it's important that we be inclusive to get all people, regardless of race, regardless of income, color, origin, tribal affiliation. We need them to be included in the discussions as well as implementation for
Yeah,
everybody to have equitable access to a healthy, sustainable, and resilient environment.
yeah. I think I like what you said there, Doc, that it's that we are including everyone in this agreement, and no one is going to be left behind. I guess just to close a little bit of this whole conversation on environmental justice, are there other things that you would like to discuss or tell us about Dr. Lagmay, I guess just to for our listeners to at least take home before we wrap up the episode.
Well, probably let me end. As I started, we said that it's about people and the environment. There's this interplay. People would like to seek development, to have progress, but we have to learn to take care of our environment. So there are
Yes.
considerations that we need to be reminded of, and that everything that we do should benefit all stakeholders, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, and we should protect the rights of a lot of the marginalized populations, the IPs, the those living below poverty level, and they have a right to planet Earth. They have to live, play, work, learn, grow, worship, and engage in cultural activities and practices. Uh, and without all of these efforts to secure environmental justice and climate justice, all of these may be denied from them. So we have to work hard. We have to remind our officials, our government officials, and everybody that the world is for everyone, and that all benefits should benefit everyone as well.
Yes, and I think that's a very nice way to end our episode, Dr. Lagmay. And we thank you for reminding us that the protection for the environment involves everyone and not just a certain group of people or our government or certain groups advocating for environmental rights. And thank you also for that reminder that everything we do affects others. So we always have to be considerate. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Lagmay. And I think that's all for today's episode of ASEAN People Speak. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to Dr. Lagmay for joining us today. If there's anything, Dr. Lagmay, that you would like to tell us or share with us before we leave, any projects or anything that you would
All
like?
right. Yes. Yeah. Access to a healthy environment is a basic human right. We have to have clean water. We have to have a healthy environment for us to be healthy and happy in this world.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And we will take note of that. That's very basic, and I agree that access to water is very fundamental. So everyone just has to have that right as well. So thank you, Dr. Lagmay. Join us again next week for another episode of our CN People Speak. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button on Spotify to stay updated and never miss an episode. You can also stay connected with us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube by following at WGSCNHRMEC. And you can also visit our website at aseanhrmec.org. Thank you so much again, guys, for listening to us. I hope you had an insightful day today. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged. Bye.